The Green Bay Packers have become reliant on the run game, maybe too reliant, but it's not a reflection of the way the team feels about Jordan Love. This is so much more about Matt LaFleur.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. There were questions, including on this show last year, about the run heaviness of the Green Bay Packers. They ended up last, and I mean last, in the NFL in neutral pass rate. Neutral pass rate is early downs, because on third down, on 3rd and 8, you really have no choice. You have to throw the ball. And when the game is still in the balance, the default settings for the stats that I use are one of the teams has a win percentage between 20 and 80%, which I guess would mean the other team has to as well. So the game is still relatively in the balance. Once you get beyond 90%, your chances of winning the games are pretty small. It's not zero, but in all likelihood, you are throwing the ball in those cases. And if you're trying to catch up, and if you're winning, you're probably running the ball. And if we just had that information, and the information that last year the Packers had an elite run game, and they did, an injured quarterback, twice injured, and that in the second half of the season, they went through a stretch of games where they were blowing teams out. I think that would tell us a lot, because number one, you blow a team out, that shortens your sample size. But if you look, like, I was trying to find a representative sample. I was trying to find, can I go through and find a set of games, a stretch of more than, 4 games where the Packers were normal, where it felt like, okay, this is the version of the team that really is consistent year to year, down to down. Isn't relying on Jordan Love, isn't relying on situation in terms of the health. And there really isn't. Because you've got the Eagles game. I continue to believe he was hurt in that game anyway. You have the Malik Willis set of games. He comes back against the Vikings, is hurt very clearly, and then that game is immediately a blowout. You're getting eight sample plays in that game. Then there's 3 games, the Rams, the Cardinals, and the Texans. By the way, the Packers win all of those games, and Jordan Love looks pretty good in all of them. And then gets hurt again against Jacksonville. Plays very clearly hurt against Detroit. Has the bye week. This is when he starts to look healthy, but then you've got a Bears game, 2 blowouts, the 49ers and the Dolphins. You sandwich in there a Detroit game where your offense no shows in the first half and you basically have to throw it the whole second half. Probably did not have a win percentage above 20% in the second half of that game until the very end, maybe. And you're definitely going to be throwing in those situations. But then they blow out the Seahawks. They blow out the Saints with a backup quarterback. I'm not sure they had a win percentage below 80 after the first half or the first quarter against the Saints. So how much of the season really tells us very much about the Green Bay Packers? I bring this up because Bootleg Football, Brett Coleman, used this as an excuse to say, I don't think the Packers believe in Jordan Love. Now, I don't think we have to make it that complicated. I really don't. A team with an elite run game, and a coach that likes to run the ball. Matt LaFleur is not like Kevin O'Connell, where if he had his druthers, he throw the ball 50 times a game. I think that's what Kevin O'Connell wants to be, if he could be. I don't think that's what Matt LaFleur wants to do. He said multiple times on the record, we like to establish the run game in a physical way. We think it sets the tone for our offense. He is the coach that knows you don't need to run the ball effectively to have good play action, and yet wants to run the ball effectively to set up play action. There is a little bit of old school in Matt LaFleur, even though he is a young coach, the youthful look, all that stuff. This is about Matt LaFleur, not Jordan Love. Because it's not like on 3rd and 8, they're throwing short of the sticks, they're running receiver screens. That to me is a bigger indication of what you're going to let the quarterback do. On 3rd and 8, are you letting the quarterback play football? And if you look at average depth of target, and if you look at things like 3rd down, distance to the sticks, Jordan Love is among league leaders. They were asking him, nay, demanding of him to throw the ball down the field, and he led the league in 20-plus yard plays last year. So that is where I would look. Not are they running the ball a lot when he's hurt, and when you have leads, and when you have a coach who has at times leaned a little conservative. In fact, I went back and checked. Over the course of Matt LaFleur's tenure in Green Bay, his neutral pass rate has fallen relative to the league. So his standing in the league has fallen every single season he has been the head coach. 5th in 2019, 10th and 11th in MVP. In MVP seasons, they had neutral pass rates 10th and 11th. Like those are high, but I guess they're above average, but they're not. When you look at them on like the plots, they're not anywhere near the top of the league. Like you guys see the top of the league. Those guys are throwing the ball 65, 70% of the time in neutral situations. That's like late career Mike McCarthy stuff. Matt LaFleur has never really wanted to be that. And in 2022, with Aaron Rodgers coming off back-to-back MVP seasons, I'm so excited I'm getting ahead of myself. I can't speak. With Aaron Rodgers coming off back-to-back MVP seasons, we're leaving it in. They had a neutral pass rate that was 17th in the league. In Jordan Love's first year as a starter, they were 20th. First year as a starter with rookies everywhere, with first year everythings. And they had essentially the same pass rate relative to their peers in neutral situations. Remember too, Jordan Love missed half of the Jaguars game and missed half the Bears game last year. In addition to the 2 weeks he fully missed, and then the how many weeks he played hurt. This is trying to find a narrative when it is so much more easy to just, this is Occam's razor. The simplest solution is these circumstances led them here because we know those things are true. Like, let's take the facts in evidence. We don't know, other than some circumstantial evidence, what the Packers think of Jordan Love, though I think $50 million a year gives us a pretty good indication. Throwing past the sticks on 3rd down consistently is a pretty good indication. Having him throw deep more than anyone in the league is a pretty good indication. But the facts and evidence are elite run game, hurt all year, and then some weird circumstances during the season where they're blowing these teams out or they're getting blown out. And there's just not a big sample size to draw from here. Occam's razor says that's a good enough reason. But the Matt LaFleur piece of this is real. I would like to see him be more aggressive, especially on early downs. And in fact, one thing I think Mr. Coleman missed in his analysis, and there were a lot of stats in the piece, and he uses stats effectively to make his case at times. But the Packers' play action usage, that's not what they were last year. This was not a turn your back to the defense. This was a heavy RPO team. You're relying on Jordan Love to make decisions. We talked about this a week or two ago. A lot of that, and it's a lot of pre-snap RPO. You decide based on the box, run or pass. Well, you're asking Jordan Love to make those calls, and teams were saying, the two high shells, it's still the biggest thing every team does. And so if you're going to play two high safeties against Green Bay, they're going to take the found money. And I have to say, like, as much as I am analytically inclined on this, and I'd like to see them especially play action on early downs. I wrote about this last year for The Leap. Everydayers will remember we talked about this a ton last year. I just thought that there was some easy buttons they weren't pressing. And I firmly believe that part of the reason they didn't is the health. I think Matt LaFleur needs to be more aggressive throwing the ball on early downs. I said it in 2019. They did it. I said it in 2020, even when Aaron Rodgers was the MVP and the offense was killing people. I said it in 2021 for sure. I know I said it in 2022, and we definitely said it the 2 last years with Jordan Love. I wanted to see more early down play action. This is not one season. This is not the Packers, Matt LaFleur realizing, oh no, we can't really cook with this guy. No. It's just not the reality. Now, the Packers are paying Jordan Love a lot of money. And they do have some roster decisions to be made. What they have to avoid is what is happening right now in Cincinnati. I want to talk about that next on Locked On Packers. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Look, I am someone who, if I can get it through a delivery service, especially like Amazon, I'm going to take that opportunity. And sometimes that means I may pick up some stuff that I don't need because it's convenient. It's easy. But all of a sudden, that starts adding up. And if you don't realize it, if you don't check, all of a sudden you go, oh, what is happening here? Monarch Money can help you track it and see it laid out. Oh, you're spending a lot getting stuff delivered. Do you need all these things? Do you need all these things right now? Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Today's episode brought to you by Rugiet Ready. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average, in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. It's all completely online. Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. What's going on in Cincinnati right now is a warning to every team in the league, including the Packers. Including and especially the Packers, because they are paying Jordan Love $50 million. The Bengals are paying Joe Burrow $50 million. And what never made sense to me is why you would pay then Jamar Chase $40 million and T. Higgins $25 million. Now the T. Higgins deal is kind of better than I thought it was on first blush. But the reason you're paying Joe Burrow that much money is so that he can elevate some of the secondary pieces. And the reason you're paying Jamar Chase all that money is because he can be your offense independent of almost anything else. And that those two guys together are force multipliers. And the reason you pay someone like Trey Hendrickson is because he is the engine of a defense that is championship caliber. Except by paying T. Higgins, you're proving that the first two pieces of that offensive part are not true. And we know without paying Trey Hendrickson, the Bengals defense is terrible. It's bad. So imagine if you go back to 2020, the Packers are paying Aaron Rodgers at the top of the market. They're paying David Bakhtiari at the top of the market. They're paying Jair Alexander at the top of the market. And they shelled out big name free agent signings to Zadarius Smith, not at the top of the market, but had Devontae Adams, they could have given Devontae Adams a top of the market deal after 2021. Those teams were 13-win teams, the number 1 and number 2 seeds in the NFL. They were NFC championship teams. They were teams that were, if those core guys had stayed healthy, good enough to win a Super Bowl. The problem was not that they waited too long on Joe Burrow or waited too long on Jamar Chase or T. Higgins or Trey Hendrickson, though clearly in the case of Trey Hendrickson, they did. The mistake they made was believing that their team a year ago was good enough to compete. That defense was just never going to be good enough. The offensive infrastructure is great, but clearly not good enough to overcome the defensive flaws. They had an opportunity this offseason to reset. Trade T. Higgins, get some draft capital, add some young, cheap pieces, and then use that money to sign an interior offensive lineman, a defensive player, and maybe allocate some of those resources to Trey Hendrickson and build this back. Or sign T. Higgins, take all of your offseason and spend that, whatever capital you have on defense, and trade Trey Hendrickson. Allocating $30, $35, $40 million to Trey Hendrickson, which is what the Bengals are seemingly going to do, on a defense that could not stop me and my 10 closest friends, is horrible team building. If it were me, I would have traded T. Higgins a year ago, knowing that I want to pay Jamar Chase. I'm already paying Joe Burrow. That has to be my offensive core, my offensive identity. And if I'm going to allocate resources on offense somewhere else, it should be at offensive line and or running back. Maybe tight end. It can't be a second wide receiver. That just doesn't make sense. It's never made sense. And if I'm going to pay a defensive player at or near the top of the market, it better be because my defense is good enough to help me win a Super Bowl. Why am I bringing this up relative to the Packers? Well, they are paying Jordan Love at the top of the market. He is making $50 million. They just paid Zach Tom. Now, not top of the market, but $22 million is near the top of the market. Joe Burrow no longer at the top of the market, right? So when they paid Joe Burrow, it was at the top. 2 years later, it's not. You're paying Rashawn Gary not at the top of the market, but in the top 10 of the market. Okay. A year from now, there's going to be questions about the cost of Tucker Kraft, the cost of Jaden Reed, the cost of a Romeo Doubs or a Dontavian Wicks. Romeo Doubs will be heading into free agency. Can they afford to keep Christian Watson? What's the price on Devontae Wyatt or Quay Walker? Devontae Wyatt will be under contract. This is a warning. You have to get the balance of these things right. And so if you're going to pay them, and you're not going to have to pay Jaden Reed or Tucker Kraft at the top of the market, but they're going to cost real money. It's going to be expensive to keep those guys if they're as good as you think they are, as good as you hope they are, if you want to get to where you want to get to this year. and Tucker Kraft takes a step forward, that's going to cost a lot of money next offseason. If Jaden Reed takes a step forward that you hope he does, and he gets closer to, say, Amon-Ra St. Brown as a slot player, he's going to cost a lot of money. You hope he does that. But it's going to cost a lot of money. You better be more than just a wild card team if you're going to do that, though. That's why this is important. That's why I'm bringing this up. Because if you don't space these things out right, if the balance of your team is not right, if you don't have the young players, the cheap players to come in, like they're lucky. They've got Evan Williams for 2 more years at least wrapped up for cheap. Same with Edgerrin Cooper. Same with Jordan Morgan. Same with Anthony Belton. Same with Matthew Golden. Same with Savion Williams. Those guys, you get 3 years with the draft picks now before you have to start thinking about contracts. You need those players to be good. The reason things fell apart for Cincinnati is they just had bad draft after bad draft. They couldn't backfill the talent. And all of a sudden, your defense is bereft. Your offense is still good, but fragile because it's so reliant on 3 players. And now you're looking around going, even if we re-sign Trey Hendrickson for a deal, even if you re-sign him for $30 million a year, what are you, the 8th best team in the AFC? Now, I don't think the Packers, as they stand today or at the end of this season, will be looking around going, are we the 8th best team in the AFC or in the NFC? Certainly not the AFC. But these things can flip in a hurry. So you have to be cognizant of these things. Now, the Bengals' failures could be to the benefit of the Packers. We'll talk about that to close out Locked On Packers. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy, and fantasy football is so back. Fire up the group chats, get your draft boards ready, buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, overreactions. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy, the place where I have played fantasy football my whole life. Yahoo Fantasy is fantasy football to me. Right now, I'm playing fantasy football on Yahoo, and you should be too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a fantasy football league with Yahoo at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. The Green Bay Packers set up Zach Tom's salary so that in 2025, he's not going to cost very much on the cap at all. Base salary is going to be $1.206 million in 2025, according to Tom Silverstein. Cap number, $7.4 million. That means the Packers have $31 million under the cap. And what Tom adds is plenty of room to do another extension or 2 or be a player in acquiring a veteran through trade. Now, Tom Silverstein has been covering the Green Bay Packers for a long time. He knows they don't make trades. That makes this interesting to me. This feels like, and we've talked about this a lot over the years here at Locked On Packers. I've talked about it a lot offline with our pal Jason Hirschhorn, America's Guest, my co-founder at The Leap. Is he reporting without reporting? Is he doing the thing that beat writers, sometimes local podcast hosts, myself included, do when you have a little information? It's not the kind of information you really report, but you suggest something might happen or could happen because you know there's a chance it would happen. This feels like that. Sometimes you just speculate. Tom is not one of those guys that just speculates a lot. Not like it's never happened. But this is specific because it is suggesting a thing that could happen that has never happened or that very rarely actually happens. So that perks my antenna a little bit. Now, there is nothing unique about what the Packers are doing with Zach Tom's salary. So from that standpoint, it's not like, oh, well, they're doing this thing in this instance And that tells us X, Y. No, this is what they always do with these big extensions. It is itty bitty number in the first year on base salary because you're going to get that guaranteed money, which you can spread across the years of the deal. And so that allows it to really have just like this tiny number. $30 million, which basically gets to spread over 5 years because it's a 4-year extension on top of this year, but you get to start the clock on the 30 now. So it's 1.2, then you add the 6 in there, 6 and change. So it's 7.4. That's the mob accounting of NFL salary caps. I know that's confusing, but go with it. They could have taken more. They have the money. And they are much less flexible next year. They have some cap crunches next year. They have to make some decisions next year. That's why we've talked about, and that's why Elton Jenkins is holding out. Well, he technically is on NFI now. The Packers are kind of saving him from having to actually hold out. But this is interesting. Because they did take all the money for Jair Alexander, but when it comes to dead money, if you can take the hit all at once, the smart thing is to take the hit all at once. The Packers can, so they did. They reworked that deal, and so now they're able to take all that hit in year one rather than spreading it out. They could afford to do that. This is different. This is different. They could have said, well, we'd rather have the flexibility a little more next year. So rather than have these like balloon years in year 3 and 4 the same way, we'll have a little bit more base salary in year 1. Now, again, they don't really do this very often. They don't put big numbers in year 1, even medium numbers in year 1 on big extensions very often because this is all fake. I suspect when we see final numbers, what you will see is a very fake 4th year of this extension because every year, every time the Packers do an extension, especially year 4 and sometimes year 3 of a 4-year contract is fake. It's 2 years and then we'll see. And what the Packers inevitably do with players they want to keep, it's 2 years and you rework the deal. Because you're not going to play on a 4th year where your base salary is, whatever. Where your cap hit is $70 million. I think Jordan Love has a cap hit in one of his future years. That's like $70 million. It's like that's not going to count. That's not going to happen. They're going to rework that deal. And that's what you do when you have these big deals is you rework them and you rework them and you push them out and you push them out. And that's what the good teams do. That's what the Packers have done for years. Because if you have good players, it doesn't matter. You just keep reworking the contracts. They never get to year 4 of a deal if in year 2 you go, up, new deal. Year 4 never happens. That $70 million cap hit, that $50 million cap hit, it doesn't ever happen. And the players, they ought to know that. The agents certainly know that. But you get to say, well, Zach Tom signs for 4 years, $88 million, even if he's on the team in 4 years, it will not be at whatever cap number he is slated to be on right now. So maybe it's nothing. Again, this is just how the Packers have tended to operate. But maybe it's not nothing. Maybe it's not. I guess we'll see. More to come. Packers open training camp today. You can actually watch them on the field today. We heard from Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur today, which means starting tomorrow, we will have football to talk about. Hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah. We'll see you tomorrow. Follow me on all the social medias. Follow the podcast on all the social media. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts. Subscribe over on our YouTube page so you can stay locked on Packers.